There are wounds in you that haven't healed, but they've stopped bleeding, so you pretend they're gone. You convince yourself you're over it. You smile, work, laugh, even fall in love again. But every now and then, something tiny breaks the surface. A message left unanswered. A silence longer than usual. A mistake that feels unforgivable. And suddenly you're right back there, standing in the middle of your oldest pain, asking the same silent question. Why does it still hurt? You were told that time heals all things, but you've learned that's not true. Time just buries things. What heals is understanding. What transforms is seeing clearly what you've been afraid to face. Because this isn't the first time you've felt broken. And deep down, you're tired. Tired of rebuilding yourself with shaky hands only to fall again. Tired of waking up strong but going to bed empty. Tired of trying to be someone who can't be broken while carrying pieces of yourself that never fully came back together. But here's the truth no one told you. The version of you that keeps breaking was never the real you. It was a version of yourself you built to survive. The one who wanted to be liked, the one who feared being alone, the one who carried everyone's weight so you wouldn't be abandoned. But that version was always temporary, and every time life breaks you, it's not trying to destroy you, it's trying to destroy what you've outgrown. Carl Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And maybe that's what this breaking is. A divine interruption. Not punishment, but invitation. To stop running, to stop pretending, to stop surviving as a fragment when you were born whole. You'll never be broken again, not because life stops hurting, but because you finally understand that pain is a messenger, not your enemy. And what it's been trying to say is this: the real you, the one behind the mask, the one beneath the fear, was never fragile. It was never at risk. You've just been living too far from it. So today, we begin a journey, not to harden you, not to armor you, but to return you to the part of you that cannot break, the self Jung called whole. And once you meet it, everything changes. Not all at once, not without effort. But the next time life shakes you, you won't fall. You'll observe. You'll breathe. You'll respond with truth instead of fear. If you're ready to begin this inner return, stay with me. And if this message already stirred something in you, it's because the healing has already begun. If that's you, subscribe and join this space, where we don't just survive pain, we alchemize it. And tell me in the comments, when did you first feel like you broke? Let's walk this path together. You didn't keep breaking because you were weak. You kept breaking because you were never taught how to hold yourself together. You were taught to push through, to get over it, to be strong. But no one told you what strength really is. They made you believe that strength was pretending not to feel, that healing was hiding the hurt long enough for it to fade. But it never faded. It just followed you, silently shaping the way you lived. You learned to smile when you were in pain, to say "I'm fine" when your soul was collapsing. You learned to overachieve so no one would see your doubt, to be kind so no one would abandon you, to be useful so no one would leave. These weren't conscious choices, they were survival strategies, pieces of armor stitched together by fear. But the thing about armor is this: it keeps out harm, yes, but it also keeps out intimacy. And when you live inside a fortress, you don't just protect yourself from pain, you block yourself from joy. Carl Jung believed the psyche naturally seeks wholeness. But to become whole, it has to reclaim what's been denied. He said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That means you don't stop breaking by adding more armor. You stop breaking when you stop abandoning yourself. Look back for a moment. The moments that shattered you. Was it the event that broke you, or what you believed about yourself because of it? You were rejected and believed you weren't enough. You were betrayed and believed you couldn't trust anyone again. You failed and believed you were a failure. The pain wasn't in the event, it was in the meaning you gave it. And every time you repeated that meaning, You reinforced the wound. This is how patterns are born, not from the outside, but from within. You unconsciously seek people and experiences that mirror your internal beliefs, not because you want to suffer, but because a part of you is trying to resolve the original wound. You're trying to find the missing piece in someone else when it's been in you all along. You don't need to be saved. You need to be reclaimed by yourself. The you that was before the pain, the you that trusted easily, spoke honestly, loved deeply. That version of you still exists. It's just waiting for permission to return. This isn't about blaming yourself for your pain. It's about realizing your power. Because if your beliefs shaped your pain, then changing those beliefs can end the pattern. And the moment you understand that, you stop being a victim of life and start becoming its co-creator. You've broken before. That's true. But what if that breaking was the beginning of becoming? What if every fracture was a doorway to the self you were always meant to meet? The real you isn't the one that breaks. The real you is the one that watches, listens, and rebuilds with wisdom. That's the one we're returning to now. The one Carl Jung knew lived deep beneath the noise of the world, whole, waiting, and unshakable. You thought strength was keeping it together, never crying, never asking, never needing. But that was never strength. That was fear wearing strength like a mask. You thought being strong meant proving to the world you could do it all alone. But real strength doesn't fear connection. It doesn't push people away. It doesn't pretend it's fine when the soul is bleeding. Real strength is the courage to be seen, not the polished version, not the curated mask, but the raw, trembling truth of who you are. Real strength is the kind that bends so it doesn't break. The kind that says, yes, I'm hurting, and I will still show up. Carl Jung understood this contradiction. He knew that what society called weakness was often a deeper invitation to power. He wrote, "The acceptance of the self is the essence of the whole moral problem and the epitome of a whole outlook on life." What he meant was this: your healing begins when you stop rejecting what you've been taught to hide. You were told not to feel too much, not to want too deeply, not to be too sensitive. But everything you were told to suppress is exactly what makes you alive. That sensitivity you buried? It's how you feel truth. That longing you've been ashamed of. It's how you find direction. That ache you've carried for years. It's not weakness. It's the soul's way of pointing you toward wholeness. And if you've been breaking over and over again, maybe it's because you've been trying to be someone you're not, trying to fit into a life that's too small for the size of your truth. Maybe the pain isn't a sign of your failure. Maybe it's the body's rebellion against a self that's been silenced for too long. You don't need to keep pretending. You don't need to keep proving. You don't need to keep performing. You just need to be completely, honestly, unapologetically. That's where your unbreakable self lives. Not behind the mask, not under the armor, but in the honest center of your being. So next time the world tries to tell you to stay strong, ask yourself, do they mean strong as in silent, numb, and disconnected, or strong as in soft, conscious, and awake? Because there's a kind of strength that doesn't look like what you were taught. It doesn't shout, it doesn't harden, it doesn't hide, it simply stands, present, grounded, and free. And that kind of strength, the strength that comes from truth, that's the kind that can't be broken. That's the kind Carl Jung devoted his life to uncovering. Not the strength of suppression, but the strength of self-integration. Not the strength of perfection, but the strength of presence. The kind that says, this is me, completely, and I am whole. Some wounds don't bleed. They don't leave visible scars. They're silent, hidden. But they shape everything. The way you love, the way you trust, the way you pull back just as something begins to feel good. You smile, laugh, perform, but beneath it, something trembles. The fear that if you let someone in, they'll find the place where you still feel unworthy. Carl Jung spoke about the wound we carry, not just from childhood, but from the moments we abandoned ourselves to be accepted by others. He believed that the real trauma is not always what happened to us, but what we had to become in order to survive it. You learn to be agreeable. You learn to stay silent. You learn to show the world the version of you that wouldn't be rejected. But what you didn't learn was how to love the parts of you you were forced to hide. And so they became wounds, not because they were wrong, but because they were forgotten. This is the invisible wound, the quiet belief that you are not enough unless you perform, the silent narrative that tells you love must be earned, that safety comes only through control, that being fully seen is too risky. And so you carry that wound into every room, into every relationship, into every dream, not consciously, but energetically. You don't mean to push people away, but you do. You don't mean to self-sabotage, but it happens. You don't mean to shrink yourself, but the fear always feels louder than your truth. This is not weakness. This is not failure. This is the unconscious calling for integration. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That feeling of being stuck, that's not your fault. It's your wound trying to speak. But here's the powerful truth. What has not been loved within you will continue to show up in your life until you choose to face it. Every relationship that makes you feel small, every opportunity that slips away, every dream you almost had the courage to chase but didn't, they're all messengers. The wound cannot be healed by external validation. No amount of applause or attention can reach it. Only your own gaze, turned inward, can begin the healing. Only your own decision to sit with what hurts rather than run from it. That is the beginning of becoming someone who is no longer broken by the world. Because when you stop fearing your own pain, you stop fearing life. When you finally see the invisible wound and say, "You are not my shame, you are my teacher," something sacred begins. Not a return to who you were, but an emergence of who you were always meant to be. The wound doesn't need to disappear to stop defining you. It needs to be seen, held, understood. Because once you bring light to what you've buried, it no longer controls you. It becomes your power, not your prison. And that is when you begin to rise. There comes a moment in every journey where something shifts. Not because the pain disappears, but because you finally see it clearly. Not as an enemy, but as a mirror. And in that mirror, you realize the truth that Carl Jung spent his life exploring. That the freedom you seek does not come from fixing your past. It comes from choosing your present. You cannot change what hurt you. You cannot rewrite the early chapters. But you can stop letting them decide how the story ends. That is the essence of conscious choice. It is the moment when you stop living in reaction to the world and start responding from awareness. Jung taught that the psyche, when left unconscious, becomes a force of destiny. But the moment you bring awareness to your patterns, to your pain, to your projections, everything changes. Because now, you're not just moving through life, you're shaping it. Every time you feel rejected and choose not to collapse. Every time you feel unseen and choose not to shrink. Every time you feel afraid and still choose to show up. You are rewriting the neural pathways that kept you stuck. You are teaching your nervous system a new language, one of presence, one of peace. This is not about becoming perfect. It's not about always making the right choice. It's about realizing that even in your darkest moment, you still have the power to choose how you relate to it. Will you turn away from the pain, or will you let it teach you? Most people never realize they have this power. They live in loops, seeking comfort, avoiding discomfort, and wondering why they feel disconnected. But the moment you choose differently, to pause, to breathe, to feel, to respond rather than react, you begin to dissolve the loop. This is how healing becomes real. Not through some grand transformation, but through small conscious acts of self-respect. Choosing silence instead of lashing out. Choosing rest instead of self-punishment. Choosing truth instead of pretending you're fine. These choices matter. Because with each one you say to yourself, I am worth protecting. I am worth listening to. I am worth loving. And slowly life begins to reflect that back to you. not because the world has changed, but because you have. People begin to treat you differently, not because they suddenly became better, but because your energy no longer invites what you used to tolerate. That's the power of conscious choice. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, but it is revolutionary. It is the quiet decision to no longer betray yourself, to no longer abandon yourself for the comfort of others, to no longer perform to be loved. When you begin to live this way, something shifts in the atmosphere around you. Your boundaries become clear, your presence becomes magnetic, and your life, for the first time, starts to feel like yours. This is not just healing, it's liberation. And it begins not tomorrow, not when everything is perfect, but right now, in this very moment, with the next choice you make. To become someone who is no longer broken by life, you must be willing to let go of the version of you that was built in survival, the version that learned to adapt, to please, to earn love, to avoid abandonment at any cost. That self was necessary once. It kept you safe. But it is not who you truly are. Carl Jung called this process transformation through death, not a physical death, but a symbolic one, the death of the false self, the ego identity you constructed to be accepted, to avoid rejection, to control your pain. And like all deaths, it is terrifying, because it asks you to let go of what you know, even if what you know is suffering. We become attached to our wounds, not because we enjoy pain, but because pain is familiar. The story that says, "I am not enough," is painful, but it gives you something to cling to, something that feels like certainty. And to step away from that story is to enter the unknown. Who are you without your pain? Who are you if you no longer carry the identity of the broken one? This is the spiritual crisis Jung often described, the moment when the soul begins to rise, but the ego tries to pull it back. You may feel like everything is falling apart. Your relationships shift, your ambitions dissolve, your old comforts feel hollow. That is not failure, that is rebirth. The death of the old self is not neat, it is not graceful, it is a slow unlearning, one layer at a time. You begin to notice the roles you used to play, the masks you used to wear, the ways you used to dim your light to be accepted. And each time you choose to show up differently, to speak honestly, to walk away from what drains you, to rest when you used to push through, a piece of the old self falls away. This death is sacred, because it makes space for the real you to emerge. The you who is not defined by pain, the you who doesn't chase love but radiates it, the you who no longer performs for belonging, because you belong to yourself. But you must be willing to mourn, to grieve the loss of the comfort that came from pretending, to feel the emptiness that comes when you no longer numb yourself. This grief is not a step backward, it is the passageway forward. Every tear you cry for the self you're releasing waters the roots of who you're becoming. Jung believed that we do not become whole by seeking light alone, but by bringing the darkness into awareness. The death of the old self is not darkness, it is the space in which light is born. You cannot take your pain with you into the life you truly want. You must let it burn off, not through force, but through compassion, by standing with yourself in the fire, without running, without numbing, without pretending. When the old self dies, there is silence, stillness, space, and from that space, something ancient stirs. Not a new identity to perform, but a deeper truth, a quiet knowing that you have always been whole, and now, finally, you are ready to live from that wholeness. This is how you become someone who will never be broken again, not because you are armored, but because you are real. If you want to live unbreakably, you must reach the place within where nothing about you is denied, nothing about you is rejected, nothing about you is treated as unworthy. This is what Carl Jung meant by radical acceptance, not self-improvement, but self-integration. The kind of acceptance that meets your anger without judgment, that allows your sadness to exist without needing to fix it. that holds your fear like a child instead of exiling it into silence. Most people spend their lives trying to become someone else, someone better, more likable, more productive, more lovable. But the truth is, you will never be free until you accept all of who you are, the brilliant, the broken, the noble, the selfish, until nothing about you has to hide in the dark. This is what Jung called shadow integration. The moment when you stop dividing yourself into categories of good and bad and start asking instead, what part of me is asking to be seen? Because the parts of you that cause chaos are never trying to ruin your life. They are trying to get your attention. The part of you that sabotages relationships isn't cruel, it's scared. The part of you that lashes out isn't evil, it's defending a wound. The part of you that pulls away, that freezes, that self-destructs, it's not broken, it's unhealed. You cannot reject your way into wholeness. You cannot hate your shadow into silence. Healing does not happen when you get rid of your pain. It happens when you love yourself in the places that hurt the most. Radical acceptance isn't soft, it's fierce. It's the courage to say, this is who I am right now, and I will not abandon myself again. It's not settling, it's awakening. You accept yourself not to stay stuck, but to become free, because what you accept, you can transform. Imagine this. Instead of criticizing yourself after you mess up, you pause and say, that hurt, but I'm still worthy. Instead of spiraling into shame, you take a breath and say, I'm learning. I don't need to punish myself to grow. That shift from rejection to compassion, that's the foundation of an unbreakable soul. Radical acceptance means you are no longer at war with yourself. And when the war ends inside you, nothing outside you can truly defeat you. The insults don't land. The rejection doesn't define you. The loss doesn't hollow you out, because you have returned to your center, and in that center, there is peace. Carl Jung believed that real transformation begins with the willingness to face yourself fully, not as you wish you were, but as you are. That is how you become whole. That is how you become unshakable. That is how you become someone who will never be broken again. There is one more layer to becoming unbreakable, and it might be the hardest. You must let go of your attachment to how life is supposed to look. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. Carl Jung said, we must be able to let go of the life we've planned so as to have the life that is waiting for us. Attachment is not love. It's control disguised as hope. It's the belief that unless you get the job, the relationship, the approval, the plan, you will never be okay. That's the illusion that keeps you trapped in suffering. You think the pain comes from losing something, but what really hurts is the belief that you needed it to be whole. Look at your life, the moments that hurt the most. Were they painful because of what happened, or because of how tightly you held on? When the relationship ended, did the pain come from the absence, or from the identity you built around it? When the opportunity disappeared, did it destroy you? Or did it expose how much you depended on it for meaning? Detachment is the shift from expectation to presence, from forcing to allowing. It's when you stop trying to control every outcome and start trusting the flow of your life. This is not a passive surrender. It's an empowered choice. You stop living like a beggar of fate and start living like the author of your own becoming. When you detach, you're no longer manipulated by fear. You can show up fully, not because you know how it will end, but because you're no longer afraid of how it might. You can love someone deeply and still let them go if they're not aligned. You can pursue your goals with passion and still be at peace if they change. That's not indifference, it's maturity. Jung understood that the ego loves control because control feels safe. But the self, the deeper part of you, it doesn't crave safety. It craves truth. And truth isn't found in what you hold on to. It's revealed in what you're willing to release. Think about the most powerful people you've ever known. Not in title, but in presence. They didn't cling. They didn't chase. They didn't beg to be seen. Their strength came from their detachment. They didn't need the world to bend to their will because they were already standing in their truth. That's what it means to be unbreakable. You don't fall apart when the world shifts. You adapt. You evolve. You remain anchored because your peace is not tied to the temporary. It's rooted in the eternal. The you that exists before achievement, before failure, before validation. The moment you stop saying this must work out and start saying whatever happens I will grow, that's the moment nothing can break you again. You've been told life is unfair. That pain is just something that happens to you. That some people get love and others are left behind. That some people rise while others are destined to fall. But here's what Carl Jung revealed. The most dangerous lie is the one that makes you feel powerless. The belief that you are a victim of life will quietly destroy you. Not all at once, but slowly, silently, by convincing you that your suffering is inevitable, that your story is out of your hands, that your worth is determined by how others treat you. It robs you of the one truth that could set you free, that you are the author of your reality. Victimhood feels safe. It gives you someone to blame. It justifies your pain. It gives you permission to stop trying. But in doing so, it steals your agency. Because as long as you believe the world owes you something, you will keep waiting for what will never come. Rescue. Nobody is coming to save you. And while that may sound harsh, it is also the most liberating truth you will ever hear. Because it means you don't have to wait anymore. You don't have to beg to be chosen. You don't have to earn your value. You get to choose yourself, right here, right now. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Your patterns are not fate. Your pain is not fate. Your past is not fate. They are reflections of your unconscious wounds. And the moment you begin to see them clearly is the moment you begin to heal. When you let go of the identity that says, I am broken, and replace it with, I am becoming, everything changes. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this revealing in me? That is the shift from victim to creator, from wounded to wise, from fragile to unbreakable. The people who rise are not the ones who never fell. They are the ones who chose to rise again and again, until standing became their nature. They are not special. They are not chosen. They are simply awake. Awake to their patterns. Awake to their power. Awake to their responsibility. The truth is, nobody can make you feel small unless you hand them the power to define you. No one can break you unless you have built your identity around them. No situation can destroy you unless you have tied your worth to its outcome. The moment you reclaim that power, the power to define your worth, to author your meaning, to choose your next step, you rise out of victimhood and into your life. And from that place, no one and nothing can ever break you again. There is a moment, subtle but unforgettable, when you realize that everything you thought was destroying you was actually revealing you. That the heartbreak, the betrayal, the abandonment were not evidence of your weakness, but the exact experiences that carved your strength. That's the power Carl Jung pointed to again and again, the transformation of suffering into selfhood. What if the pain wasn't in your way, but the way itself? When you stop resisting your pain and begin interpreting it, it becomes a mirror. You see the fear that made you stay too long, the wound that made you chase validation, the belief that made you settle for less. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. From that clarity, something radical awakens, self-respect. You begin to act differently. You speak with more certainty. You walk away from what once captivated you, not because you've become cold or arrogant, but because you've become whole. And the moment you realize that nothing outside of you has the authority to define your worth, your life shifts. People who cannot manipulate you will say you've changed. People who cannot control you will call you selfish. But what they're really saying is this: You've stopped playing small. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." That privilege isn't granted by the world. It's earned through confrontation with your shadow, with your patterns, with your illusions. It's the privilege of someone who has sat alone in the dark and refused to run. Someone who has met their pain without flinching and chose growth over comfort. This is the root of unbreakable confidence. Not ego, not pretending, but deep, quiet alignment with your core. You no longer perform for approval. You no longer betray yourself to belong. You are anchored, not in others, not in outcomes, but in your own truth. And the world feels that. People notice the way you carry yourself, the way you speak without apology, the way you no longer chase what depletes you. That energy, calm, grounded, unapologetically whole, is rare. And when you find it within yourself, you become untouchable. This is what it means to never be broken again. Not that life won't test you, it will, but that no test will take from you what you've claimed. And what you've claimed is this: your worth is not up for debate. If this message stirred something inside you, let that be the beginning. Leave a comment below. Share what spoke to you most. Subscribe to this channel and join a community of people on the same journey of depth and self-reclamation. Because the world doesn't need more perfection. It needs more people who are whole. And it begins with one choice: to rise. See you in the next video.